Welcome to High Notes, conversations on the art and business of voice. High Notes. Make sure you never miss a video on our channel by pressing that subscribe button, and if you like this episode, please do give it a like and leave us a comment below. Now, let's meet this month's guest. I'm your host, Melissa Thom, and today we talk to Jessica Jefferies, a casting director with a background in motion capture and performance capture for video games. Jessica also casts and works with actors and performers for all narrative forms, including specialisms such as voice work, creature performance, puppetry, and movement. In this episode, we delve into her backstory, the challenges and joys of working in casting, and the evolving landscape of performance capture in the gaming industry. Welcome to High Notes, Jessica. We're going to get straight into it. Before we talk about your current role as a casting director, tell me a little bit about how it all began.
Oh, okay. So I was an actor. I sort of fell into video games. I did my first motion capture job not long after graduating from drama school. It was either in 2010 or 2011. I then just became a sort of jobbing motion capture actor. I was one of a small group of people that just played about in Lycra. And I did that for 8 years and had a wonderful time. Dabbled in obviously other mediums, but honestly, primarily, I just worked in film and games doing motion and performance capture.
So let me dig into that a little bit because I love that. I love the way you just say, I just sort of fell into video games. And of course, we work with so much talent now where that is their dream. That is their number one dream. Cast your mind back. I guess mocap at that time wasn't as well known about. So how did you fall into it? What was that first gig?
It really was a different industry in that it wasn't really an industry. Like it was, but it wasn't. It was, well, it was probably actually just quite unfair, is what it was, because it wasn't open to new talent. There were no people casting in the same way, especially not for the motion capture performers. So I got my first job because my agent at the time was based at Pinewood Studios, and she had given my CV to a motion capture studio called Centroid and said, take it on this new graduate who's got all of this stage combat training and gymnastics and stuff that was all my background. And they had a week-long demo coming up for a company called Supermassive Games for Sony. And they gave 2 CVs to the director of that game and said, "Hey, do you want either of these girls?" And they picked me. And then I did a week demo for them. And then I ended up being on that game for 3.5 years on that one game. And then because I'd gotten known by the studio, they just brought me in for every other project that they had. And then I got known by other studios just by word of mouth. It was years and years before I even ever had an audition to do a job. It was different days, and I definitely played many roles that I wasn't right for, to be honest, just because I was there. So yeah, it was a very different industry.
When did the shift happen between being a performer and moving into casting? What drew you to casting, and what was that transition like?
A few things drew me in. I was getting a bit old and creaky.
You don't look
I
old
thought,
and creaky, I
I
promise you.
I definitely am. Do you know what it was? I was very physical. I was very physically active, and I started to get the fear. I started to get fear of things. I remember being on set one day and being told I needed to vault over something. And for the first time, fear kicked in. And then shortly after that, a director was like, cool, can you backflip? And I was like, you're about 2 years too late for that. No, I can't anymore because the fear of going backwards had kicked in. So I realized that actually a lot of those skills that I'd really enjoyed, and I was just a bit knackered and just a bit I felt like I'd hit a ceiling, very much. I wasn't being seen for the big leads, for the likeness characters, for the amount of voice work that I wanted to do. I didn't know how to cross the next bit or step up the ladder at all. And then I'd been pigeonholed as a mocap girl, and so then I wasn't getting the theatre auditions, the TV auditions and stuff that I wanted. So as an actor, I just felt I'd hit a ceiling.
Let me just pick up on something I heard you say, which I hear from so many people in this industry, was that you weren't getting seen. Can I dig into that a little bit deeper? Because you were getting pigeonholed as a mocap actor, you were feeling like you'd kind of reached the pinnacle of that. How did you make the change? If you weren't getting seen, did you then decide that acting wasn't for you and you'd move into casting? Was that the precursor to that?
I wanted a bit more autonomy over my own career. I wanted something new, but I desperately wanted to stay creative. And I still love that part of the industry. So I wanted to be somebody that could open the doors, which I'd always felt were very closed for actors, and make a link between game devs and studios and the amazing acting talent that we have throughout the UK and Europe. And so I wanted to then be a gateway to that. But I'd already, for 2 years, had been working with equity and sort of annoying them, being like, "Do you realize that we're not paid properly? Do you realize that I have had many days on set where I'm told I'm not allowed to drink water because they don't want me to have a toilet break?" The treatment in the entire time that I was a performer, so for 8 years, I don't think I ever signed a proper contract. I was never credited properly. I was never paid properly in line with the rest of the industry. So there were all these things that I felt were wrong in the games industry that needed to step up to be in line with film and TV industry, and I didn't feel I was listened to as an actor, and I thought I needed to make myself in a position where I was gonna be listened to,
I know you've
and
done an awful
yeah.
lot of campaigning in that field. I've followed you for a long time. I'll pick up on those things in just a tick, but I just want to kind of introduce our listeners a little bit to motion and performance capture. They're still fairly new disciplines in entertainment. What excites you most about how this particular field is evolving?
Oh, the possibilities are endless, and the possibilities of character and the stories we can tell, and therefore the people that actors can be. You can be cast in something in performance capture, as you can with voice, that you would never be cast as in TV, film, or theatre, you know? The sorts of stories we can tell, there are no limitations as to the weird and wonderful worlds that you can explore digitally. And that then transpires down into the storytellers, the actors, being able to embody that. And as a genre in itself, in the wrong hands, it can be intimidating and it could be potentially, I don't know, it could probably be very nerve-wracking, but in the right hands and when actors are taken care of and they're in a they they know they're safe in that environment, it can be the most playful and freeing thing ever. You've got no set, you've got no costume, you've got no lighting, you've got no props. It's just you and your imagination in Lycra, like having a ball, having a ball. And so it can be really hark back to all those years ago when we were kids and the reasons that we probably became actors. And for anyone that went to drama school, just that feeling of play, of being in a rehearsal room constantly, that's the same feeling that I always got on a performance capture set.
Hmm. It's fascinating to
So,
hear
yeah.
your thoughts on it. Let's talk a little bit about casting. From a casting perspective, what do you think makes a great voice or performance capture actor stand out in an audition? Now, I'm asking you these questions because these are the questions we get all the time. But what is it that an actor can do in an audition that makes them stand out?
It's creativity. It's being you. It's boldly and truthfully being you. And honestly, that's what I love storytellers. I love really good connected storytellers. Even if you're being an 8'4" troll, I want to believe it. I want there to be truth there. And that's what it is for me. There's got to be connection between voice and body. So even in just a voice audition, depending on the character, sometimes I ask for a video audition rather than just an audio demo. Casting and animation at the moment, and we've been meeting actors in person because we want to meet them. I want to see you embodying this character because that all translates into voice as well. So that connection, that imagination is what I love.
We talk about that so much in our training here at Brava about connecting between mind and body. One thing, I've noticed a lot of over the years is many of us need permission to play. Many of us kind of come boxed up, and I include myself in that over the years. When we train here, what's so lovely is almost seeing individuals unfurl and realizing that they have the agency. They direct themselves most of the time. And I think that idea of playfulness is something that we want to see more and more and more. And being able to let go of not being able to play is quite an important choice. Consistent choices as well and truthfulness, all of those things are so, so important from our point of view.
They are. I think it's such a massive part of my job, though, is to create a space and to create a conversation where actors feel comfortable to be playful and be themselves. If I'm meeting an actor in person, I want to make sure that the room is warm and welcoming and that they just come and can be brilliant. And then if I'm asking for demos and things, I want to be as clear with my direction or anything where they feel they can go off and run with it and that they're not scrambling around feeling unsure of what they're delivering and then maybe sending something and being like, I don't know if that's what they want, or then overthinking. I never want that. I was that actor for so many years, so I just want to create the best place because then we're just going to get the best out of actors. And I think that's the main bulk of my job.
I mean, you sound like a dream to work with, to be honest, because of course that happens a lot in careers where you meet a director and you click and you spark and you get on really, really well. But very often that doesn't happen all the time. And I think you have to have the agency to be able to dig deep and deliver a performance despite what might be around you, but despite being in a cold room and not having a toilet break, which I would certainly hope doesn't happen today.
I
Anyway,
hope not.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But I think, yeah, having a dream director like you would be fantastic. But what would your advice be if you are struggling to connect with a director? And I'm not saying that in the sense that other directors are terrible. I'm sort of saying sometimes it's hard, sometimes two of you don't connect. But what advice would you have if an actor finds himself in that space? How can they dig deep?
It is mutual, but I do believe that it's the role of a really good director. And I've seen this so many times with brilliant directors that I work with who work with actors, and maybe an actor isn't understanding or for whatever reason isn't taking a note on board. And that director reworks, rewords, retranslates the direction so that they work with the best way that the actor works. And I think if you're in a position as an actor, the other way round, where you're just not understanding or clicking, it's about just trying to reform everything as best you can because you're all aiming for the same end goal. So maybe it's just about rewording questions or going back to the very basics and just saying, okay, look, I feel we've lost our way. I've lost the thread of who this character is. Do you mind if we just reestablish some real basics of who we are, when we are, where we are, and then move on again with the dialogue? That could be, I think, a useful thing to do just to make sure that everyone's reminded of the end game, which is storytelling, you
Yeah,
know?
such great words of advice. Let's talk a little bit about casting. It's such a nuanced process. What is one of the most challenging casting briefs you've ever had to fulfill?
Oh my days. Loads. There's many, many things I love about my job. I do really love working with new teams and getting to know through the process and through early pre-casting discussions about how that director works and maybe if it's a game, how the entire narrative team work together and digging deep to really find out what sort of actors they like working with, what's going to make them tick. I'm working on a game at the moment and we're just starting to look at voices. And I've been sending some reels over of people that I'm like, okay, I wonder if this is a sort. And I've realized, oh, okay, you don't like listening to voice reels. You don't get them. So I now need to send theatre and film reels for a voice job because what they really love is theatre actors and actors that have that grasp of character that they don't feel they're getting from a voice reel. And I'm like, oh, so working out what each team like and how they work, I find that fascinating. And it means that every process then is different.
Yeah, it's so interesting hearing it all from you. You talked about some clients love theatre actors. How important today do you think traditional theatre acting training is?
I mean, I do still think it's important. I think all mediums of performance are important and special and beautiful. And do I think actors going to drama school still need to spend 3 months looking at Renaissance theatre? No. Do I think they'd be better off getting some training in voice work, animation, performance capture, new media, all of that stuff? Yeah, I think that would be way more useful for today's climate. I can't imagine a world without theatre. And so, in terms of what it teaches an actor to be in a space, to be in a rehearsal room, to be collaborative, to have a process with an end goal that is so completely unlike film, TV, and anything else, then yeah, I do think it's important, and I do think it's still relevant.
We're in times of such extreme change when it comes to the creative arts. Yes, I'm going to mention AI, just in the sense that we're seeing more AI generated voices and deepfake performances. What do you think about this technology in terms of the landscape for voice actors and performance capture artists? Is there an irreplaceable human element in what we do?
I don't believe we could be replaced. Although I tried to say that about my own job, and my cousin literally was like, "Okay, give me a casting brief," and then asked ChatGPT, and they gave a list of amazing actors, and I was like, "Okay, you can do my job." That's quite upsetting, but
But
no,
that's
like,
interesting. Let me pick up on that because yes, they can give you a list, but
yeah,
what you have is a relationship, right? You have that relationship, and I think that's what people tend to forget a lot of the time. For example, at Bravo, we know all of our talent really, really well. We work with them for a minimum of 3 months, if not 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And I think, isn't that what's important? I mean, what do you think?
no amount of brilliance in technology can trump an actor's instinct. If you audition for me, I can't think of an instance when the first thing we do isn't an instinctive read. Because I wanna see your instincts as this character, and then that's where we have somewhere to play. I wanna see that, and I think that can't be replaced. There's finances and all sorts of things come into play that have made it a scary time, but we had the same at the beginning of the internet, there's all of those, like, clips that are going around of people being like, "Oh, it'll never take off." Oh, wait, no, no, no. And now look, we've honed it and we use it for good. And I think that's the same as any technology. I think in the right hands, it could probably be useful. I don't know enough about it, like other than what's very generalized. I focus on making sure that people have informed consent when it comes to additional usage and reusage of their performances. I think that's massive. I think we're in a time where you do really need to read your contracts and make sure that you know exactly what you're getting into for reuse and use in AI. AI is such a broad term, and I think that's the thing. It's such a trigger term that just terrifies people. Whereas actually in game development, AI has been used for years and years and years and years. And AI is a huge part of performance capture and in developing physical performances and putting them into game. That's part of the game engine and part of the software. So as something that's used to sort of scaremonger as a term, I think we have to be careful with that.
I don't want to spend the whole session on this, but I do feel it's important to ask questions on the importance of diversity and representation. I am finding when I have conversations behind the scenes that most people want to support these initiatives, but we are obviously in a time now where a lot of these things are being polled. And so publicly, those discussions are kind of not happening. I just want to ask you on how important it is for you when you're casting to reflect diversity and representation.
I tend to use the term inclusivity. I think it just sits nice. It sits well with me. And I think it's hugely important. And I think as a society, the stories we tell should reflect the world that we live in. Part of my job, I enjoy being creative with casting decisions and with casting offers to the team, ensuring that my lists and shortlists and things like that are as inclusive and diverse as they can be within the parameters of who the characters are. I try not to take the mick, and but there are many, many factors that come into who we cast and why and who the best actor is for each role. And also, we can only cast for what stories are being created. I'm not a writer. I'm not the head of Microsoft, who's the person commissioning stuff. So I cherish those opportunities where we get more of a free reign or when a story is maybe more global. There's two games that I've cast in the last couple of years that have been really global in terms of voices. And just being able to hear all of those accents and knowing that our casting has reflected that we've got those people and being able to do far and wide, and it just sounds so interesting. And all the characters look so interesting and so different, even though neither of these games take place on even this planet. There's a game called Unknown Nine that I cast, and the lead is a young woman who grew up on the streets of Calcutta. She's a young woman of Indian descent, and just being able to cast that as the lead, like it's just really great. And I think we all jump at those opportunities. I cast a workshop for a theatre project, a new play, and they were workshopping this new play for a week. And we got together a group of five just utterly brilliant actors. All of them were neurodiverse. And so they all came with their own stories to bring to this piece. And so it's just things like that, like, are just wonderful. But at the end of the day, even as casting directors, we can offer brilliant things, but it's not just there's as much as we like to think it, there's not one white man sat there going, "No." There's a lot of factors that come into a casting decision, which might mean that actually the project hasn't ended up maybe quite as inclusive or diverse as we would have liked. But ensuring that as a casting director and as a member of the CDG, we have such amazing resources and training available that with deaf theatre initiatives, knowing where we can go for support and advice with different access requirements and all of that. There's so many things that we have access to just to ensure that in the casting process we can be as inclusive as possible and ensure that we're doing all we can to make the process inclusive as well.
Yeah. I know it's something very close to your heart. And again, I see a lot of your work and I see you talking about it online. So I know you're active in this space. And I think really interesting to hear your thoughts on that. Let's talk a little bit about training and career development. So here at Bravo, we train voice actors across various disciplines, not just games. But of course, we get so many talent coming to us who are interested in breaking into video games or performance capture. What specific skills or training would you recommend for those people?
I think continuing to just hone your craft, I think that's so important. I think it's really hard to be actor. I know that. It's hard to also be told continuously that you need to spend money in the hope of getting jobs. But I think continually training and workshopping is different than paying to go to a certain workshop in the hope that you'll get a job out of the end of it. I think that's entirely different. Whereas honing your craft, finding things that you're interested in, I've been asked many times about what training or qualification should you have to work in video games? And I was like, depends what games you want to do. So it depends what sort of projects you want. If you're really physical, do movement workshops, do puppetry workshops. Puppeteers, like, they know how to use their breath. That can be so useful in voice and performance capture work, that use of breath. So go explore puppetry for a few days. It might be really interesting for you. All of these skills that cross over. So in terms of just continually learning, continually exploring will just make you continually creative as well. Because you'll discover things in those spaces and in those workshops, right? I bet people that come to Brava weekly are still discovering new things about themselves, and they're all things that they can then offer to
Yeah.
project.
One of the things I pick up on there is certainly something that we talk about a lot is having an element of curiosity, because we are living in a world where we all like to broadcast about ourselves, and that is great. But actually, isn't life much more interesting when we are curious about others and curious what else is out there? It's really important here at Bravo that we exist to help all voices that come to us. But we do have a particular remit to serve those in Bristol and the Southwest. Why is it important for you to be based here?
Oh, well, I'm based here because it was my key to being able to continue working as a mother. As a mum, we moved here to be near family. I've got two young boys. One just turned 5 at the weekend, and my other one's 2. And we needed family support, and we needed accessible, more affordable childcare. And being in London just didn't allow that. In all honesty, I'm probably in London as much, but I have also a much better work-life balance.
Interesting.
Bristol is such a creative city, and what I really loved is you and I met. I don't think I'd been here that long at all.
Oh,
Maybe
really?
just a few months.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't
So,
realize.
just reaching out to other creatives in the Southwest has been lovely. There's a couple of other casting directors that are based here that I'm really really good pals with, and it's really nice. And it's still such a creative place. There's still so much going on. And I just think if there's anything positive that came out of the pandemic, it was everybody realizing they didn't have to be in London. And that goes for creatives as well as actors and performers. I will also always have a discussion with an actor or their agent about their accessibility to auditions and how to make that best work for someone. Someone lives in Glasgow. I'm not going to ask them to travel to London for an unpaid first round audition. It's unreasonable. We all have lives, and being able to work around school hours for working parents or working around their childcare, all of these things, I think opened the discussion. I made it okay to have those discussions, and the actors aren't just needing to be available wherever and whenever we want them. And I think that's huge.
Yeah. We're very glad to have you in Bristol, so that's good. Coming up to the last couple of questions now. If you could cast yourself in any video game or animation project, what kind of character would you want to play?
Something weird and wonderful. I spoke about this recently, and I know that when I was an actor and well, when I was really young and I'd read the books, I wanted to be Katniss Everdeen in Hunger Games. And then I grew up and I was in a game called Horizon Zero Dawn, where me and my best mate Amanda just got to run around in Lycra with bows and arrows and do that as a game. And I was like, well, that was wicked. So probably something like that, someone quite badass. I think I'd like, I think I'd like that,
Do you know what? Well, the
just to be
badass
in.
characters are kind of always the most fun, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
But you know what? In lieu of that, I am happy to meet you at Lee Woods in Lycra with a couple of bows and arrows. We could just run round there if you like.
Yeah, let's do
Yeah, all right. It's a
it.
date. Okay, finally, what is next for you and your casting team? Are there any upcoming projects or developments in the industry that you are excited about?
I've branched out after, and just to be very honest, after what was an entirely crap time in the industry. It got so quiet. I'd had a maternity break with my second, and I was ready in September to come back, September before last. I was like, "Hey, right, I'm ready to work again." And then SAG strikes and tumbleweed basically greeted me. And then I spent last year, the first 6 months of probably 6, 7 months of last year, doing little bitty jobs, doing more commercials and things like that, and just having meetings and pushing myself out of my comfort zone of games. And what came off the back of that was theatre projects, more commercials. I'm working on an animated series now with Netflix, and that's very exciting. We're loving doing that. I've partnered up with a wonderful casting director called Emma Sylvester, and we collaborate on a lot of our bigger projects together. We're both working mums, so it helps with the juggle. And then we've got 2 game projects on as well. So that's what we're doing at the moment. And all of it is a bit boring because it's all under NDA, so I'm not actually allowed to say. But it was a push out of my comfort zone of a scary time to say to anyone that's listening and things are maybe quiet or they have been quiet, I was there, and just use it as fuel to work harder, dig deep, and work harder and just continue reaching out to people.
Yeah. And I think that
Yeah.
last point is really key and a lovely place for us to close the conversation on, which is about when the chips are down, what can we create ourselves? Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to High Notes. High Notes, a podcast on the art and business of voice. Thanks for joining us on this episode of High Notes. Check out the episode description below for more information. And to find out more about our work at Brava and get info and tips, subscribe to our newsletter. The link is also below. Join us next time for more insights into the world of voice.